Can you advise how you intend to structure the 49% shareholding that's going to be available to New Zealanders so it stays in the hands of New Zealanders for now and into the future? I've seen too many schemes like this where eventually they are sold to foreigners. And I appreciate what you're trying to do, but how do we ensure that the benefit of those shares stays with New Zealanders into the future?
Okay. Can I just give you a fact here? Foreign ownership of our share market has been dropping consistently for the last 6 or 7 years. So New Zealand owns more and more of the share market. And I can't see any reason why that trend would change. We're not getting ahead of ourselves around detailed policy over the mixed ownership model. You know, if we are re-elected, we will then proceed with the policy. But in the meantime, we are looking at a number of the schemes that have been used by different governments. The driving principle is Kiwis at the front of the queue. We need to be able to achieve that while still getting good value for the taxpayer. I mean, all that happens is we give them a share certificate and they give us the cash. We ended up with the same amount of assets. It's just in cash instead of as half a power company. And a number of those schemes focus on things like loyalty. So can you reward people for holding the share for longer? And other schemes focus on having more widespread ownership, so allowing people, for instance, to pay in instalments if they can't afford to pay it all up front. I have no doubt we will have, if we get to do this, there will be very strong interest from the New Zealanders in buying it. I mean, in the end, you could make a whole lot of rules, but the record is in Contact Energy, which was the last big one done back in the late 90s, a very significant proportion of the people who bought shares then still own them. And it is the most, I think, the most widely held company on the share market. We in the end, if you want to run a capitalist economy and people have shares, then I believe New Zealanders will want to own those companies. And that's what will make the thing work. So we'll look at whether their loyalty should be rewarded, but we're not going to, I don't think, go as far as banning them from being able to being able to sell, because the market has to be able to work.
I wasn't entirely convinced with your explanation as to how we're going to retain ownership of your sell down in the shares. One thing that appears to be happening, and I come up with a lot of it with a lot of friends and colleagues who are very concerned that the incentives that you're going to provide to prevent offshore selling. Are you going to guarantee that they go to our super fund, or are you going to give a tax incentive perhaps to Kiwi owners to retain their shares as opposed to selling them on the open market? Because basically it would be against our principles of free enterprise if we were to put restrictions. So it's going to be very difficult to convince the public, and that's the problem I have, thanks.
Yeah, well, look, we understand, I think, understand the concern, but just bear in mind foreign ownership. Some foreign ownership of our share market is something we have lived with for the whole time we've had a share market, and it's been up at times in the past. There's been foreign ownership of up to sort of 40% of the New Zealand share market, and as I said before, the last 6 or 7 years it's been consistently dropping. And some people would look at that and say that's not such a good thing, because it means that our share market is less attractive, so we're going to have less capital coming into the companies that we need to grow this economy. So I think some of the political opposition are focusing on that issue because they think it's one that will get public resonance. But we'll go through a process which will see Kiwis at the front of the queue, probably a significant majority of the shares go to Kiwis, and who knows, it's not clear whether, because we haven't looked in detail at the rules yet. Kiwis will still have the opportunity to on-sell shares. Otherwise, it's not a market. You can't sort of say, well, you can have the share, but you're not allowed to sell it to anybody. That is, doesn't even happen in places like China. So I think we should be, well, they're much more right-wing than us. We're very middle of the road. So I think we shouldn't be driven too much by the fear that if a New Zealander sells their shares to an Australian, that's going to be bad for our economy. In fact, your banks are Australian, your largest insurance companies are Australian. No one even notices. What we want is energy companies that are getting their prices down, taking part in a market that's working and providing value for shareholders. So we can go a long way encouraging New Zealanders into this. We'll look at the incentive scheme, but I can't make the commitment that we will restrict further sale of those shares.